Hi guys, today I have a special guest. His name is Mo Saleem. He's a fitness coach, online fitness coach, or rather online calisthenics coach, which also trains who also trains MMA. So I thought it would be a good idea to interview someone like him, he's basically an expert in fitness and in strength training. He's been helping people lose weight and gain strength online. And I think it's such a great perspective to have. This is why I asked him to do an interview with me, to see what kind of, what did he find out? How did his MMA training go? How did he begin with MMA training at all? So I think this is going to be interesting for you because many of you guys are beginners. Many of you guys do strength training as well. I get many questions about how you should incorporate strength training into MMA training. So we'll talk to the expert now. So Mo, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Did I do a good job explaining what you do? Do you want to add something to that?
Yes, so right now my main focus is on helping people online get stronger muscles, but also more importantly, stronger joints. And this is something that I've noticed is an issue for a lot of people when they are engaging in an activity outside of strength training. A lot of them aren't able to do so because of joint issues. And that's an issue that I had myself. Giving you a quick backstory for me, I had recurring issues actually with my knees, tore cartilage in both of my knees. And now I'm at a point where I have been able to heal those prior joint injuries, and training martial arts was always something that I wanted to do, but there was an hesitation just because of the injury that do come from such an intense sport. So now I've been able to train consistently, and we can definitely dive into more around that. But specifically, what I wanted to elaborate is that it's not just about stronger muscles, but stronger joints as well that allow us to engage in the activities that we want long term.
Okay, so what would be a few tips you can share with us for people who train MMA, but they also want to get stronger? And please let us know about the joint strength. What's the difference between muscle strength and joint strength? And is it trained differently?
So the reality is that muscle tissue adapts at a much faster rate to resistance than connective tissue, which would be our joints, ligaments, and tendons. So it's a matter of what I've noticed with clients is that they might be lifting weights in the gym and then they get stronger muscles. But at the same time, their joints haven't adapted at the same rate that their muscles have. And then when they get to a certain point where the muscles may be able to lift that weight, the joints aren't, and then that is where the issues come up. So specifically with making the joints stronger, a lot of it comes down to prehab training. You can see a lot of this stuff on YouTube. I make some videos around this as well. Just adequately going through that pre-habilitation routine before your training session with the wrists, elbows, shoulders, shoulder blades, spine, hips, knees, ankles, making sure that you go through that range of motion, just like the warm-up that we do. Perhaps you have it on your channel as well. But just allowing the synovial fluid to get into those areas so that when you do engage with that strenuous activity, then it is inevitable that your joints will end up in a vulnerable position. But then the stronger your joints are through a wider range of motion, the less susceptible they will be to injury, because getting into vulnerable positions is inevitable with what we're training right now.
So does this type of training include flexibility and mobility training? And also, can you tell us the difference? Because there's a lot of people talking about the mobility training. So what's the difference between the flexibility and mobility training? And also, do you include it in your training with your clients, and do you do it yourself?
Yeah. So there is a bit of a gray area in terms of what the difference is. I've been studying this a lot as well. From what I understand, flexibility is the ability of your muscle or joint to get into a range of motion. So for example, if we're doing a hamstring stretch and you can get into a certain position, but then you can use your upper body strength to go even further. So you're using additional assistance to get deeper into that stretch. So I would look at that as flexibility. What mobility would be your ability to get into the widest range of motion without external resistance helping you get into that position. That's the way I see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. And do you do a mobility training and flexibility yourself?
Yes. So I focus on both, and specifically right now what I've been focusing on is just opening up my hips for specifically the kicks and opening up for the head kicks as well. I noticed that I have a lot of room for improvement over there. And then when it comes to working with clients around these areas, it just depends on what their specific limitations are. So the common occurrences that I've seen more often than not, clients have issues with their lower back. I know that you've had issues over there, and then the issues with their shoulders. And the framework that I share with them is that your scapula, which is your shoulder blades, it's the linchpin of your upper body, because there's no upper body movement that can be exhibited without engaging the scapula. And then the issues with the scapula is what leads to the issues with the shoulder as well. So a lot of times people think they have issues with their shoulders, but really it's that their scapula is tight. And then the side issue that manifests is the shoulder issues. And the same thing, what the scapula is to the upper body, I see the hips to the lower body. And then again, I had mentioned that I had issues with my knees. And what was happening is that I would tear my meniscus. This happened in both of my knees, on multiple occasions. And looking back at it now, what I know from this perspective, when the hips, which are supposed to be a mobile joint, become tight, then the knees, which are supposed to be a stable joint, compensate by becoming mobile. And then when they get into the vulnerable position, they're more likely to do so when they do compensate for tight hips. So the body is one structure, and it's important to focus on what specific weak links you have and working on those. So that's just a long way of saying that, yes, mobility and flexibility is a focus. And if someone wants longevity in the activity that they're engaged in, it's crucial that they make it a practice as well.
Right. So how did you injure your knees? Is it through martial arts training?
So the first time that I injured my knee was while squatting. And it wasn't even like I was squatting very heavy. I was in the gym and I was just warming up at it. It was like 20 kilos on each side. And I remember I went down and I heard a pop, and I imagined that my knee entered into a vulnerable position. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll just walk home. I'll do a workout tomorrow. And then the next day when I woke up, I couldn't even walk. And then I got a MRI and found out that I had torn my meniscus. And then again, I can say the squat led to the injury. But looking back, I realized that it's not necessarily the cause of the injury. Squat wasn't the cause of the injury. The cause was just a lack of mobility and flexibility, because before that point, my only focus was on bodybuilding style training, just going through the same repetitive motions again and again without focusing on mobility or flexibility. And then injury was a result of that.
Mm-hmm. So, guys, Mo is extremely strong. He could do one-arm pull-up. Now that he doesn't train calisthenics, he trains calisthenics, but he trains MMA a lot. So he's not as strong as he was before. We'll come to that. But I've seen him beast out on the bar. I've seen him do one-arm pull-ups. Like it's crazy. So you started with bodybuilding first, right? It's regular bodybuilding training. What made you switch to calisthenics?
So I started with bodybuilding. Then the first time that I got injured, like I just mentioned, I was off for 6 weeks and I lost a lot of size, a lot of muscle, and so much of my identity at the time was tied into my physique that after losing that, I'm like, okay, I have to get this back after I get recovered. So I didn't learn the lesson the first time. And then I went through the same training style again without focusing on mobility, flexibility. And then I ended up injuring my other knee on a separate occasion on the leg press. So those two injuries then allowed me to take a step back and really consider what I'm doing this for. Why am I doing this? How can I stay injury-free? Because martial arts was always something I wanted to do at the back of my head. But then I would start and then I would do grappling, for example, or wrestling. And then, as you know, your knees are pretty vulnerable over there. I think it's one of the most common injuries with grappling. So I would just end up tweaking something or the other and then wouldn't be able to continue. So then bodybuilding just became the means for me to project an image of strength. I suppose a lot of us as men want to be strong, of course, right? So it's just a matter of what domain you're training. But then after that point, I started looking into different training modalities like yoga. Like I actually started with Wim Hof breathing, and then he has some yoga asanas at the end of his breathing. It was a 6-week course. So that's when I first got introduced to, flexibility, mobility training, started researching a lot on biomechanics, on structural integrity of the human skeletal structure and how the spine is what connects the brain to the body, your scapula to your hips. So seeing the body as an integrated unit rather than isolating just, okay, today I'm going to do arms, today I'm going to do shoulders, today I'm going to do legs. And then exploring the different modalities, I arrived at calisthenics, gymnastic style training. I just call it body weight training. Of course, calisthenics is what we know it as, but it's wider and more diverse than just the specific movements that are in calisthenics. But it's the modality that I saw trains the different dimensions of fitness at the same time. So when it comes to fitness, we have strength, of course, we have mobility and flexibility, we have our cardio, we have our explosiveness and power. So calisthenics was a modality that I saw being able to train all of those at the same time. So for example, if I wanted to train my stamina and my cardio, I could train in a circuit style. You can do that with bodybuilding, of course. And then also, since you are training your muscles to move your own body, you are getting more limber as you get stronger because your muscles are moving your own body. So you have an awareness of how your body is moving through space as well, which is not the case when you're just moving something external. So I saw it as a dynamic method to not only get stronger, but also develop better awareness of how my body moves through space, which is a fascination of mine.
Great. So I heard about this distinction that in calisthenics, you move your body through space, and in bodybuilding or weightlifting, you move weight through space. So, but I didn't necessarily know that it makes you more limber. Yeah, although many people say, oh, bodybuilding makes you stiff. Okay, so many times I get a question from people online or personally, can I go to the gym and lift weights, either CrossFit style training or bodybuilding style training, and do MMA? What would you say to that?
So in a lot of my marketing, I basically hate on bodybuilding and conventional gym workouts. And of course, part of that is to get attention because people are engaged with content that's polarizing. So part of that. But the way I see it, it's not necessarily anything wrong with lifting weights. The matter that I've noticed with a lot of clients is that they may have structural imbalances from before. So maybe they spend a lot of time sitting. Maybe they spend a lot of time in suboptimal postures, lying down. So there's imbalances in their physique. And then when they are adding resistance on top of an imbalanced physique, that just emphasizes the imbalances even more, and then injuries can become the result. So I focus on bringing balance back to the physique first, making sure there's no weak links. And then, of course, if you want to focus on getting as strong as possible, focusing on deadlifts, on squats, nothing wrong with that. But again, if you're lifting weights and your physique is imbalanced, then it's going to emphasize those imbalances even more. In terms of balancing martial arts with strength training, with gym, with gymnastics, with calisthenics, it's a matter of what your goal is. So if your goal is to compete in a particular sport, then that spending time training that sport should be the priority in your calendar. If your priority is just to have pain-free movement and enjoy everyday life, then your calendar should reflect what your priority is, right?
I agree 100%. But with young people, and I was like this when I was young, which was a long time ago, we want to look good. You know, young people like to look good. They like big biceps and to be visible through the t-shirt. And then they try to do both, but at the same time, they like combat sports. And they try to get both, best of both worlds. But it doesn't work like that. You could, but as you say, it depends on what you want. So yeah, I agree 100% that you have to know your priorities. Can you tell me, how has martial arts training changed you? You've been training MMA for a year and a month now, right? You came to me to train MMA here in Belgrade, and we've been training for more than a month, almost month and a half. Before that, you've been training MMA for a year. You've been training Muay Thai and MMA in Thailand. You did some training in Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
Some in different places because you travel around. So can you give us like the explanation of how has it changed you, and also how does it differ from purely strength training?
Yeah, so it's definitely been an interesting journey. I remember when I started, or before I started, I set foot in a BJJ club in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And I remember that was the peak of my strength training slash bodybuilding days. And I was like 84, 85 kgs ripped. And I'm looking around. I'm like, oh, I'm the biggest guy in here. I can probably take these people. And then when it came to the rolling, there was this 5'2", 5'3" Thai girl who ended up, later on I found, it was like Nogi, but later on I found out she was like a brown belt. And I basically couldn't even submit her. And I was like, I'm like double her weight and I can't even submit her. And that was just a humbling moment for sure. And then when I was getting back into boxing and striking, it was like, okay, I have to be ready for the street. I have to be someone who can protect himself and the people that he loves. And then what I can say is that the biggest impact it's had on me is just been humbling, because going to these gyms and sparring with people that may be smaller and weaker and getting dominated by them, realizing that you never know what someone is capable of, even if they have huge biceps or huge chest pumping out and they're walking around. That's not necessarily an indication that they know how to fight. So there's two different components over there. And then also I remember when I started, my priority was just to get into a fight as soon as possible. And I was like, I have to get into the ring, I have to get into the cage. And now the priorities are shifting again. It's just a love for this process of learning and growth and evolution and process of mastery, gaining new skills and techniques and getting better at it. And then eventually I do have in my mind to compete as well. But I understand the difference between training and competing. It's like the difference between fighting and training. Like with fighting, it's people are there in the environment, they're watching, you're going there to knock your opponent out or submit him or just destroy him. But in training, sometimes that side of yourself is activated, but remembering, okay, you have to take care of your training partner. You don't want to mess them up, because then you won't have a training partner, taking it safe. So it's like accessing two different sides of my personality when I think about that. So it's definitely been a journey of many realizations, and then also realizing that fighting is not the same thing as violence, right? Like if someone goes and stabs you from the back, that's violence. It doesn't matter how good your martial arts is if someone has a weapon. So understanding that difference as well. And I'm sure there'll continue to be more realizations, but I can just say that the biggest change has just been the humility that I've gained, because before training, I thought that I was the strongest person walking down the street, and after training and after getting dominated by people that are smaller and weaker than myself, it just taught me a lot of humility for sure.
Yeah, that's a common occurrence. Some people take it the right way, like you did. They get their egos broken and they say, okay, I'm not good at fighting. Some people come up with many excuses why this happened. It's not their day. They slipped on a banana peel or whatever it is. I've got stories about this subject. So yeah, that's a good realization. So what would you, you are a beginner in MMA because you've been training 1 year and 1 month approximately, but you're an expert in fitness training and strength training. What would you advise young people, or just, they don't have to be young, like many people start training MMA even in their 30s and 40s, even 50s. So what would you advise them to do? How should they approach MMA in your opinion? Both from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint.
So let's start with the physical standpoint. As you've noticed through our 6 weeks together, I'd have a tendency to be very stiff. And that tendency, I suppose, comes from the time that I've spent with strength training, with calisthenics training, where the tension is meant to be maximized. You want to maximize the time under tension, whereas with striking in particular, and even martial arts in general, you want to stay loose and be tense in the moment of impact. So selective tension, like you were mentioning. So in terms of getting started, again, I would emphasize the importance of mobility and flexibility training, whether that means doing a yoga class twice a week. I know you were saying that it's not masculine, but I think
I was kidding.
Yeah, the perspective on that is definitely shifting, you know. And flexibility training for sure opens you up, and making sure that you are strong is important. So whether it's just basic calisthenics like push-ups, pull-ups, body weight squats, and then focusing on martial arts. Like if I was to give advice to myself from, let's say, 10 years ago, I would definitely make the encouragement to prioritize martial arts and then supplement that with strength training, mobility, flexibility, so that I can continue training martial arts for a long time without having issues be a regular occurrence. Because I suppose the longer you do it, the more inevitable it will be that you get injured. But the more that you can protect yourself against the injuries, then the longer that you can train. So you're not going to be damaged by that.
For sure, it's such a drug, man. These martial arts. I'm 44 years old. I still do it, even though I have injuries, man. It's a drug. For sure, it's a drug. It's so addictive. So, can you tell me about the feeling that I know everything differs. Each activity differs in a feeling, but is there anything more that you've gained from martial arts in terms of like you said, for bodybuilding, you felt good because you had the really big biceps. You still do, by the way, chest and everything. Was there anything else that you've gained from martial arts except the humbling experience, and which is really important, by the way? Is there anything else?
Yeah, mental toughness is a big one, because I remember starting out and when we do some jiu-jitsu or even like our first few sessions together, like, don't tap to that. This is not a position that you're supposed to tap on. So learning to develop that sense of comfort in extreme discomfort applies everywhere. How you can stay focused on what the goal is and also think about what the next objective is now that you find yourself in this less than optimal position. So developing that sense of knowing that no matter how bad it gets, the point is to figure out how to make the situation better. And that is a lesson, like we were talking about earlier as well. Martial arts teaches us so many lessons that can be applied in outside the mats as well. So mental toughness is definitely another big one.
Mo, you're wise beyond your years. You're 28 years old, and I have to say you're much smarter than I was at 28. So yeah, that's true. That's true. I think that many martial arts lessons have direct impact on regular life. They are direct lessons for regular life if we choose to view them that way. Only that. I mean, you can train martial arts all your life in combat sports, whatever, and not view life that way. But if you do view life that way, then I think you're getting most out of the martial arts you're training. So I want to thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you for having me.
It was great. I hope you come back to Belgrade so we can train again. Where can people find you if they want to find you online?
Yeah, you can just check out Instagram, the Mo Saleem.
The Mo Saleem. And your website?
Yeah, bodyweightchallenge.com.
Okay, you heard it. bodyweightchallenge.com. Look up Mo Saleem. He has great short videos on Instagram, actionable advice, very, very good videos. I really like his videos, so check them out. Mo, thanks again, and I'll see you guys very soon.